Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. And this is a quote by Viktor E. Frankl. He is a neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor who wrote a book known as Man's Search for Meaning. I will reference many quotes in this book because I believe there are important concepts that more people should be aware of. This is in hopes of people bettering their own lives, helping them help the lives of others, and find purpose to persevere and be resilient in trials that come along in their life. This quote embodies the overarching existential questions that people face daily. Many of these questions he asked include, how can I be successful? How can I be happy? What am I going to do in my future? And for those who don't know what career path specialization at the age of 10, they ask, why am I here? What purpose do I have of being here? For those who are not provided equal opportunity, am I going to be competent enough as my peers? Are my struggles invisible to those who do not need to fight the same battles or face any of the hardships that I have to? And the questions of those who have an unequal amount of suffering or challenges presented to them in the world. Why am I the person who has to be the victim of this suffering? What is the point of me being chosen as the life that has to face these struggles on my own, and what is the purpose of my existence? I just asked an overwhelming number of questions, which could not be possibly answered in several minutes, but I wanted to take on the challenge of attempting to answer these questions and to share my perspective. This is in hopes of being able to inspire, motivate, give you an idea you may not have thought of that you might want to apply to your life. And I want to share with you how to improve your happiness, contentment, and strength through understanding the influence of purpose and meaning on our lives. First, in tackling all these problems, we need the basic infrastructure of self-knowledge. Without self-knowledge, individuality does not exist, and happiness cannot exist without pursuing what a person themselves deems as fulfilling. This seems like a very obvious notion, but it is not uncommon that people live for their parents' values, or who their coaches or teachers want them to be, or who their peers want them to be, or any other influential human being. This negatively affects their potential to truly feel content and self-fulfilled in life. It is a pretty popular idea that is often stressed through the phrase, be yourself, but people can have a hard time grasping or executing this idea. But I would like to stress the importance of developing this self-knowledge, and not just any self-knowledge, but self-knowledge that will directly correlate with your further growth as a person. And this isn't what your favorite color is, or what your favorite Netflix show you like to binge watch on Friday night is. I mean, that's pretty important too, but that isn't what I'm getting at. It is self-knowledge that consists of having a purpose greater than oneself, as stated by Viktor E. Frankl. Now you may be wondering, what does this mean? Purpose greater than oneself? This is referring to finding purpose in someone or something that isn't directly contributing to a person's direct self-interest. Examples include a mother's purpose and happiness may be directly correlated in investing her time in her child. This is purpose greater than oneself that contributes to her value as a human being as important. It also gives her satisfaction and contributes to her purpose. When she's having a bad day, it is not uncommon for parents to stay resilient for the well-being of their children. This is an example of having purpose that is greater than oneself, that is a person. Another example of finding purpose greater than oneself is finding purpose through causes. Examples include finding a meaning to existing through playing a certain sport, or helping the community in a certain way, or being part of an organization that ends child hunger. Whether it is just being part of a team sport, wanting to find the cure for cancer, or writing raps that change the lives of others, these are all causes that are greater than oneself. They contribute to a person's value they place upon themselves, because in finding meaning and purpose in these causes, they further develop their self-esteem and why their existence is important. In knowing your purpose, you can find your meaning to why you're important. It gives you a meaning to keep fighting and stay resilient when the world crashes down. This can be seen through an extreme example hopefully none of you will ever have to experience. It is the experiences of Viktor E. Frankl himself. And he uses this logic of having meaning and purpose to survive in Auschwitz. Not just survive, but preserve his mentality and contribute his experiences to the development of the psychiatric therapy of logotherapy. During his hardest times, he says he was holding on to the memory of his wife in the hope of reuniting with her again. This shows how powerful purpose is. Now that I have addressed the first part of the question, I want to tackle a part of purpose that has greatly affected my life and is really personal and important to me and some of my closest friends. These include the second part of the questions that I won't repeat, but you can read here on the screen. The last questions were correlated with the broad idea of what having purpose can do for human beings. This set of questions tackles the idea of suffering and what role it may play in developing purpose. Not all of us are given the same opportunities, families, communities, or challenges. Some of us deal with sexually abusive fathers. Some of us get cut from a sports team or regularly deal with social anxiety and ADHD, along with all the judgment that goes along with these mental illnesses. As described before, purpose is individualistic and thus very lonely. As a quote from one of my favorite books, "Loneliness is the human condition. Cultivate it. The way it tunnels into your soul allows your soul room to grow. Never expect to outgrow loneliness. Never hope to find someone who will understand you, someone to fill that space. An intelligent, sensitive person is the exception, the very great exception. If you expect to find someone who will understand you, you will grow murderous with disappointment. The best you'll ever do is to understand yourself, know what it is you want, and not let the cattle stand your way." This quote is a bit pessimistic, and I don't fully agree, but it still embodies the importance of emotional sacrifice that has to be made for being an individual. It also acknowledges the emotion of those going through things that are completely unique to them and extremely difficult for their peers to relate to. These are people who have more individualistic experiences, the people who don't fit in, thus experiencing a considerably greater amount of suffering. They are very strong and admirable because they face life's challenges, often misunderstood, alone, and hiding the unlikable parts of themselves. Through understanding and acknowledging suffering because of individuality, suffering in general, we can move on to how this applies to finding meaning in suffering. Suffering itself does not seem to have meaning, but you can find meaning in suffering. It is just suffering if the victim lets it be that, a negative effects on their lives. But I believe that you can find purpose in everything. And I'm going to tell the story of one of my friends I will call Demi, and how her circumstances embody this. She grew up with divorced parents, and some of them very abusive in all manners. Her stepfather was very physically abusive, and once threw dishes towards her brother out of anger and left him with nowhere to stay that night. When this was happening, we were just hanging out like normal teenagers, and she was staying at my house, and then she gets a call from her brother, and her brother's like, "Pick me up." And then we pick him up, and then they have to return home that night because they had nowhere else to stay. But then they would risk being submitted to that similar treatment. She asked me to just drop her off at a park, being the selfless person she is, because she didn't want to burden me. But we were like, okay, we're going to try to call the police and sort this out for protection and press charges for her brother. But then the police expressed that they had no ability to do anything. And the next day, she had to go to school and act like a normal student after all this family drama happened. Her parents also didn't provide food for her, and a lot of days she would just go for days without food, and would like eat cereal that had ants in them, and she would just have to act normal at school. And she lived in an environment growing up that was very different from this, considerably privileged, sheltered, and a bubble from many of the hardships a majority of the world and the country we live in face. Her situation made much of life a horribly lonely experience for her, and continuous fights with bouts of depression and facing apathy of her peers. Despite her situation, she didn't let it affect her, and my friend has truly changed my life with her attitudes towards life. Even when dealing with poor treatment and circumstances, she always preached to me, kill them with kindness, and passionately talks to me about how excited she is to change the world, as well as help and be there for others the way that the world couldn't be there for her. Rather than having her suffering, loneliness, and abuse cause her to turn into destructive paths, she realized that she is here for a reason, and that reason is important: to help and better the lives of others. She always told me, "I love it when someone tells me that I indirectly, positively impacted others." And this is through her thoughts and inspiring personality, creating a chain reaction from her advice, admirable mindset, and resilience. Everything she has experienced makes her advice and experiences individual to her and allows her to better unconditionally support and be there for others. Her purpose, similarly to yours and mine, she has been given through her suffering. Without her experiences, she couldn't have impacted me and others the way she had. If she gave up, she wouldn't have been able to fulfill her purpose or foresee the chain reaction and positive impact that she would have left on the world. But this doesn't come easy, to find purpose in suffering. You have to be willing to adjust your perspective. A perspective of looking at a situation for what it can offer you in developing your self-knowledge, a more productive perspective for growth than just looking at it as suffering and a victim of circumstances. As Viktor E. Frankl also stated, everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This mindset may not be easy, but definitely most rewarding in the long run. Regardless of whether opportunity is in favor or working against you, or if struggles you face seem insignificant and irrelevant to the world, there is a purpose in it for happening, even if it isn't obvious at the moment. Every person is extremely important and often create positive ripple effects that most people aren't aware of. It is possible to find further self-knowledge and purpose from hardship, thus giving each and every one of you the ability to turn a perceived negative situation into a positive one. This can be done through utilizing the power of having meaning to one's life. To simply say, you can find meaning in suffering and use purpose to survive suffering. And with this, I challenge you to find and develop your existing purpose in life. I hope you learn to utilize the power of purpose and discover self-knowledge for growth and resilience in times of suffering. I challenge you to embody the quote of loneliness. Be individualistic in your purpose in order to grow and become the happiest, most self-fulfilled person you can be. Thank you.